Hi, welcome back to Bible Basics. This is Stephen Wissett. Glad you can join me again here for another episode of dealing with preterism. Getting back to the topics and the issues at hand, there's one thing that has been a deep issue, is, of course, is fulfillment and what was fulfilled, and the whole argument and theological implications of all of that and how it all ties together. And so what I've done over this Christmas break, of course, is I've been working on a paper that'd be part of a much larger work dealing with some of the four pillars of errors within preterism and what they're based on, and some of the things that they've compacted into that creates their error. And of course, I'm dealing with, as in the four pillars, we're talking about the second coming. We're talking about the bodily resurrection, his visible appearing, of course, in the second coming, the bodily resurrection, fulfillment. And I started off with the basic premise that it extends out from the Church of Christ, where the problem, of course, is rejection of theology, creeds, and all of that, and why those that foundation right there, those rejection of those things, is big time failure and error. So hopefully we're going to get into that. It'll be a couple of episodes. I don't want to go more than 15 minutes apart or so in dealing with these things and putting it together, but it was going to be quite a lengthy section just dealing on with this, with a lot of concepts and theological ideas put together that we're going to be going through over the next few videos. And so thank you guys for subscribing, those who do. I really hope that you pay attention here and learn something from this. And of course, my whole intent is to offer up the other side of what is missing from preterism. They do not have a theology, of course. They have no systematic theology. They don't know how to tie things together. And so my prayer, of course, is that people will hear that are contemplating preterism or getting into it, and be able to see the real theological errors of that and respond to it on a one-to-one. It's one thing to read a book about preterism and being against it, but it's another to be able to interact or respond with somebody who's actually dealing with it and have talked with the people. And again, not to toot my horn, it's not meant that, but somebody who's actually educated on it. I'm not educated in quantum physics in any way, shape, or form. So if you want to have a discussion with me, you might have a better idea and a better one with a 2-year-old who at least loves math. I hate math. So that is not my field of expertise, nor am I going to pretend that I know anything about it. And I will actually say I am completely ignorant and stupid when it comes to quantum physics and all of those related fields. I'm not a physicist any way, shape, or form, and hate math. So that tells you right there, I'm the last person you talk to. And somebody who's in the second grade when it comes to theology and eschatology, no, I'm sorry, you shouldn't be going to them and asking them questions. So what I'm presenting to you is I did go back and get the education, and that's all I am saying, so that I can present material with logic, consistency, and being coherent in what I am saying, in opposition to what Preston, Jen Fishburne, Jason DeCosta, or any other Ed Stevens, Don Preston, William Bell, any one of those are saying, and to deal with it. And so let's kind of dive into today, the first part of this topic. And the first thing I want to bring out, of course, is that what I am responding to here, of course, I said about what is fulfilled and everything else, but it's more a response to Preston's video on telos to Torah, or Torah to telos, excuse me, his book on that, and the whole idea of the 40-year transition where two covenants existed at the same time, and all the theological things and implications that are associated with that 40-year transition period that they claim is there. That's what I've been dealing with over these next few videos, and trying to keep them short and one point at a time, in a sense, so that we're able to work through it and look at it thoroughly, completely, as much as possible. And then, of course, I will be tying these into with my blog, having the whole thing written out And so it'll be tied in with my blog, and it'll be put this way. So it'll be on YouTube, then associated with the blog. And I'll try to remember to put that in there, that it's the blog post that it's a part of. So with that said, as introduction, let's get right into the heart of the matter here. And the first thing that we want to do, false preterists claim that all prophecy was fulfilled by AD 70, and this 40-year period from resurrection to the destruction of the temple was a transitional period in which both covenants existed at the same time. Further, they contend this was also the millennial reign of Christ and ended when the new heavens and earth arrived after coming in AD 70. So this paper will define those basic terms that are misunderstood by full preterists and then provide the irrefutable theological evidence of why the Old Covenant ended at the cross. All prophecy concerning Christ was fulfilled, yet not all prophecy of the Old Covenant was. There was no two covenants existing at the same time, and we will explain why the law ended at the cross, scripturally and theologically. So, the first thing we want to do is define the law. And in the beginning of Don's book, he affirms that the theological mess by many partial preterists, postmillennialists, amillennialists, concerning these issues, as to when the end came and, what ended when. So what we want to do is answer correctly and refute Don's position. And to do that, we have to go back to the beginning. And here's the 2 points I want to bring up. The first one is this, that in the garden, in the tree of life, it was the knowledge of good and evil. When they partook of that, there came into their consciousness the knowing of right and wrong, what is good, what is evil. What we call that is the moral law. This existed, this knowledge of right and wrong existed from the garden all the way through. When we come to Moses and the law, this moral law was incorporated into the law of Moses. We see it in the Ten Commandments. Thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal. These are moral imperatives that we know. We do not have to have a list of rules and regulations to tell us it is wrong to kill our wife or to kill somebody else because we're a little bit upset with them, or to steal from them because, hey, I don't want somebody stealing from you, so why do I think I have the right to steal from somebody else, right? It is wrong to take things from people. It's wrong to call people names. It is wrong to act like a spoiled brat. There's all kinds of things that go against our conscience that we can sit there and say, that is not correct. That is a moral law. Now, Moses incorporated that, of course, in there with the ceremonial, the ritual, and a whole lot of other things that were just plain old common sense. You don't sleep with your sister, you don't sleep with your mother, on and on and on. There's all those kind of moral codes that were put into that and a part of that. So they're both the same. So I'm making the point, and I want you to hear this very closely. If the law of Moses ended, the moral law still continues. It does not end. It does not quit. It was there before. It will be after. Now, this is an important point because one of the things that Don Preston says is that the moral law is part and parcel of the Old Covenant. And if it is part and parcel and has its beginning and origins in the law of Moses, then if the law of Moses ended, then that moral law also ended. But if we have a moral law today, then that means that moral law existed before and after and is not part of the new covenant. That is what, or the old covenant, it continues on. And it still exists, and it is what is passed into the new covenant. But even as separate from the new covenant, people of the world who do not follow Christ, who are not in the new covenant, still have that knowledge of what is right and wrong and evil. The second thing is, the sacrifice of the animal in the garden established the type and the shadow and the pattern of that gets into the moral law, the sacrificial system. It was established long before Moses and his law was incorporated, meaning that the sacrificial system was there all the way along. We see this as a type and a shadow. This is the type and the shadow. of Abraham who offered up his son Isaac. That was to be the type and a shadow of Christ and points to the sacrifice that Jesus made. So everything about the sacrificial system is in a type and a shadow of Christ, not of the temple. I want to make that very clear. It is not a type and system of the temple. The temple is the place in which it was being done, and they're done according to the way God instituted it. But it is the type and the shadows of the sacrificial system that existed before the law of Moses, and it becomes part of the law of Moses, and then finally is fulfilled in Christ, who is the Son of God, who was sacrificed, the lamb slain from the foundation of the earth. That is absolutely moral and critical to that point. Now, of course, in my blog here, you'll see more of the details of all of this happening. So what I want to get at in this next part of this, now this covenant, the law of Moses was a covenant with the people. And when we get into New Testament times, the law was used by Paul in two ways. One, as Don Preston notes, it refers to the Torah, the law, the first 5 books. So there are times when Paul says the law, he is talking about only the first 5 books of the Pentateuch, the Torah, the law. And that is talking about the covenant, the old covenant. Now, are the writings, the Psalms, and the prophets part of the covenant? No. They are called part of the Old Testament, Old Covenant books. Yes. In that sense, there's a generic form that says the law can refer to all of the Old Covenant, and this is the reason why. Theologically, because the 5 books of the law are that the Psalms, the writings, the prophets, all support and are under and a part of the Old Covenant law, in that they were the keeping of the law. They were a part of it. They uphold it. The prophets upheld the law. David in the Psalms upheld the law and said it was good. Psalms 19, the law of the Lord is perfect and good, and it shows, all the things that David said about the law and how good the law was. This is part and parcel of the people who lived under the Old Covenant. That's the other aspect of it. So when we say the Old Covenant, we are talking about the people themselves who lived under the Old Covenant. And this extended, of course, all the way into the gospel, because Jesus then would have been the last man under the Old Covenant. And so everybody who lived before Jesus was part of and in and part of the Old Covenant. They lived under the Old Covenant. So this is real important, because when we come to Paul and he starts talking about the law and the covenant in those different terms, it could mean one of those two things, that he is talking about the law specifically, or he's talking about the Old Covenant and the people who lived under the Old Covenant, which is the Psalms and the prophets who spoke to the law and confirmed and lived by the terms of the law. Now, see, instead, we have demonstrated beyond any doubt that in the Jewish vernacular and in the biblical usage, the term the law was referring to the entirety of what is commonly called the Old Testament, from Genesis to Malachi, and it was all considered and called the law. So again, I agreed with that statement, but I made the clarifications of how that is to mean. Should we go on? No, I'm going to leave it at that. Because if we make those two distinctions in there, then we go on and we're going to deal with some more issues about the covenant, the terms and the conditions, and then of course what passes away. So this is foundational to understanding that the law was used in those two different ways in the New Testament and understood in those basically two ways. And the sacrificial system existed long before the law of Moses ended. So that means, for example, that if the law ended on the cross, no more sacrificial system is required. That is where we're leading to, and that is where we'll go into the next video. So thanks for watching, and